Hello all, we're going to look at this 35 marker today. So I've already planned one with you, but I'm going to plan a second. So assess the view that class inequality, shouldn't that blue, shouldn't I? Assess the view that class inequality is caused by cultural factors. So assess the view that class inequality is caused by cultural factors. The first thing that I pick up on is that it's got the word view, which tells me that this is a debate question. So because it's got the word view, it's telling me that it's a debate, which means I have to go for the question and then against. It's got the word view, so I have to do for, yep, no against the question, yep, for, back against. So it's a debate. View tells me it's a debate. Code in the question. Assess the view that class inequality is caused by, and because it's got class, that's telling me very specifically that it's the blue grid, that I have to use the Bernstein, Bourdieu, Gewirtz, etc., that it's the blue class grid. Hence my thing about, oh, perhaps I should make it all blue because it's the blue class grid. And assess the view that class inequality is caused by cultural factors. What I pick up on here is that culture is Bourdieu, because he specifically mentions the word culture with cultural capital. While working class have their culture subject to symbolic violence. And habitus is the expectations of your social group. So all three of those are to do with culture. So symbolic violence, cultural capital, and habitus. He also is in a paragraph with Sugarman, which is also culture about being future time orientated. And then I pick up on the fact that culture is made up of values, norms, that it's valuing education, or parents valuing education. So culture is made up of values. Culture is made up of norms, values, roles, customs. Well, roles and customs isn't relevant here, but culture is made up of values, norms, and language. So what that tells me is I need to do Bourdieu, given that he is specifically culture. I need to do a paragraph on values or parental values. With to parent values with Douglas and Phillips and Palmer. Oh, open today. Oh God. So it gives me an idea that that's culture also. And language being Bernstein. So I'm just trying to decode this. Oh, it's really annoying me. That's not either, is it? Okay. Right, for language, I've got culture, values, and language as cultural paragraphs. And then against, which has nothing to do with culture, would be material factors and labelling. So it gives me an idea there of what I need to consider. Assess the view that view is the debate, it's the class grid, and I have to say this side, yes, it's culture, and then against, no, it's not culture, it's something else, then back to culture. And I always aim for 6 paragraphs, excluding the introduction and conclusion. It's a debate, so it has to go 3, 4 if I can, and 3 against if I can. In an introduction, I plan it, and you should plan it too, much longer before you actually start to write it. So I know what I'm going to put in the introduction because I've already planned the question. But in the introduction, the reason why I give you the Department for Education and Statistics is so you can include them in an introduction. So the DFE, Department for Education, in 2018 found that 21% of free school meals pupils, sorry, that's the heater. 21% of free school meal pupils achieved a 5 in both English and maths. In 2018, the AP found that 21% of free school meals pupils achieved a 5 in both English and maths, when the average is 41%. So that's we want to highlight the inequality gap. 21% free school meals, average is 41%. Some sociologists have suggested that this inequality is caused by cultural factors. So some have suggested that this inequality, this gap, is caused by cultural factors, as it means students can lack knowledge, values, and the language needed to achieve in education. Cultural factors mean that they're going to lack the knowledge, the values, and the language needed to succeed in education. It can cause lower levels of effort. It can cause lower levels of effort. Culture can cause lower levels of effort, lower expectations, and a language barrier. Again, giving them an overview of what those cultural paragraphs will be. It can cause lower levels of effort, lower expectations, and have a complete language barrier. However, I'm going to spend 3 paragraphs in this essay going against culture that's got nothing to do with it. However, others have pointed to material factors and setting and streaming, as these factors can prevent concentration and restrict grades, as these factors can prevent concentration and limit grades. I've outlined the inequality gap for class. I've suggested that actually culture can cause the inequality and given an overview of the paragraphs I will discuss and why they can cause class inequality, and then give an evaluative tone. However, others have pointed to material and setting and streaming, because these are the ones that can prevent concentration and limit grades. In an introduction, you want to give the examiner an overview of what your essay, the structure of your essay, of what the paragraphs are likely to be and why, without listing too much, but yeah, giving an overview. That's my introduction, and as I say, I know this because I've already planned this question, which means I've got a very good idea of the overview that I can give the examiner. In paragraph 1, I'm going to do cultural factors, because cultural factors specifically mentions the word culture, and that's the question, and it's got Bourdieu and Sugarman. I am then going to go against with material factors. Smith and Noble, Forsyth and Furlong. Then I'm going to go back to culture and point out that actually parental attitudes, that paragraph, is culture as well. And that really can have an impact upon working class achievement. So parental attitudes. Then I'm going to go against and suggest, no, it's not. It's labelling. Actually, what I'm going to do, I'm going to do labelling before material. Apologies there, folks. Because labelling's bigger. It's got more sociologists. So if I run out of time, I'm better off having bigger, chunkier paragraphs at the start and then moving to the smaller ones. Cultural, no labelling. Parents, parental attitudes is also culture. No, material deprivation is the issue. Then I'm going to go back again and point out that language is also culture with Bernstein. And then by that point, I run out. So I haven't actually got enough paragraphs. Let me just check. I'm sure I could double check this already, but let me just triple check. There we go. There's education. Classwork. Education. Packs. Social class. Okay, let's just check and tick it off then. So we've got stats, we've got material deprivation as a paragraph. Parental has got a paragraph. Language, cultural, and labelling. There's only 5. So it's got to be uneven. So there's only going to be 5 paragraphs. Right, for cultural factors then. So cultural factors can have an impact on class inequality. Try and address the question as much as we can. For Bourdieu, middle class have cultural capital. Middle class have cultural capital. An advantage in their norms, values, language, and knowledge. They have an educational advantage, a cultural capital, an advantage in their norms, values, language, and knowledge. The working class are subject to symbolic violence, where their culture is undermined. And both have habitus, or the expectations of their social group. And these can either motivate, or they can either encourage or discourage. For Bourdieu, the middle class have cultural capital, they have an advantage in their norms, values, language, and knowledge. But the working class find that their culture is often undermined or subject to symbolic violence. And habitus, or the expectations of your social group, can either encourage or discourage. For Sugarman, working class culture is often a barrier to achievement. It's often a barrier to achievement, as it's often fatalistic, or it's often subject by fatalism. What will be, will be. And working class culture is often present time orientated. It's often present time orientated and seeks immediate gratification. Sugarman, working class culture is often a barrier to achievement in education. It's often fatalism. It's often characterized by fatalism. What will be, I'm not naturally very bright. And working class culture is often very present time orientated and seeks immediate gratification. Now, I'm not putting Gewirtz there because she is both economic and cultural factors. So I'm going to save her for evaluation. So must have this shows to do AO2 or analysis. So this shows, and it must address the specifics of the question. This shows that class inequality is caused by cultural factors. This shows that class inequality is caused by cultural factors. Working class culture is often devalued, causing them to disengage. Working class culture is often devalued, causing them to disengage. It causes lower expectations, that's the habitus. Often causes them to disengage as their culture is devalued. It causes lower expectations and makes them focus on present time, not investing, leading them not to invest in education. It causes lower expectations. It leads them to focus very much on the present time and not investing in education at all. The impact of culture is that they're going to disengage, they're going to have lower expectations, they're going to focus only on the now, leading them not to invest in education. In our evaluation, however, for Gewirtz, I know she's culture, but she's also suggesting it's both. For Gewirtz, she notes that class inequality is caused by both cultural and economic capital. It's both cultural and economic capital that causes class inequality. He argues, however, it's both cultural and economic capital that causes class inequality, or it's both cultural and economic capital that causes, it's caused by both cultural and economic factors, because capital, sorry, is an advantage. Factors. But class inequality is caused by both cultural and economic factors that cause working class groups to underachieve. Both economic and cultural factors, not just cultural. Okay. However, class inequality is not caused by cultural factors, but by labelling in education. I'm going to go against it. It's got nothing to do with culture, it's labelling. For Becker, so Becker studied 60 teachers and found that they have an ideal type who's most likely to be middle class. They have an ideal type who's most likely to be middle class. They interpret working class behaviour as less interested, interpret them as less interested and motivated. Working class groups are often labelled as low achievers. They internalise. They're often labelled as low achievers, placed into bottom set. They're often labelled as low achievers, placed into bottom set. They internalise or accept failure. They often placed into bottom set. They internalise or accept failure, leading them to fulfil prophecy. They're often labelled as low achievers, placed into bottom set. They internalise or accept failure, leading them to fulfil the prophecy. For Ray, children as young as 10 internalise or accept failure. And for Hargreaves, the judgment of ability, for Hargreaves, the judgment of ability is often based on the homes that children come from. Working class groups are seen as less intelligent and expected to fail. Judgment of ability is often based on the homes that children come from. Working class groups are seen as less intelligent and often expected to fail. This shows my AO2. It is not, check the question, this shows it's not cultural factors it shows it's not cultural factors that cause class inequality. Instead, it is setting and streaming. Instead, it is setting and streaming that causes inequality. As working class groups have their grades restricted, and give up as they have internalized failure. It's not cultural, it's labeling, it's setting and streaming, because they've had their grades physically restricted, which reduces their achievement, and they've internalized the idea that they're going to fail. They've accepted failure and given up. However, have a however in every paragraph. However, for Blackman, Afro-Caribbean girls are labelled and streamed. For Blackman, Afro-Caribbean girls are labelled and streamed, but work hard to resist and achieve in spite. And achieve in spite of this. This suggests other explanations are needed. Potentially the involvement of parents, or cultural factors. Trying to link the evaluation back as well. However, for Blackman, Afro-Caribbean girls are labelled and streamed, but they work hard to resist them and achieve in spite of this. This suggests that other explanations are needed, potentially in the involvement of parents or cultural factors. There's 2 paragraphs. Paragraph 1, culture, Bourdieu, Gewirtz. Paragraph 2, nope, it's not culture, it's labelling. Becker, Hargreaves, Ray. Back to culture. Has to go for, then against, then back to for. Okay, has to go for, against, for, against, for, against. So parental attitudes is a cultural factor that impacts on class, or has an impact on class inequality. Parental attitudes is a cultural factor that impacts on class inequality or achievement. So in the parental factors, we are going to do, for Douglas, parental interest, parental interest is the most important factor. Douglas, parental is the most important factor behind achievement. And he measured the frequency of visits to school. And that working class parents, he concluded that working class parents are less interested in their children's education. Parental interest is the most important factor. Measure the frequency of visits to school and finds that working class parents are less interested in their children's education. For Phillips and Palmer, middle class parents are more child-centred. Middle class parents are much more child-centred and encourage their children to plan ahead, be future time orientated, and they can socially control their children. Quite a statement. More child-centred, they encourage their children to plan ahead, and they can socially control their children. For Saunders, middle-class children are more hardworking, just more hardworking, motivated, and intelligent. Douglas, Phillips and Palmer and Saunders. Read my AO2. This shows that cultural factors do affect attainment, as parents can encourage their children to value education. As cultural factors, as parents can encourage their children to value education, complete homework, and revision, making them more successful. Make their children more successful. They can encourage their children to value education, encourage them to do homework and revision, which will make them more successful. However, Keddy angrily rejects this view, as working class culture is not inferior. Working class culture is not inferior. And many parents, or many working class parents, work shifts, so are unable to attend parents' evening. They're unable to attend parents' evening. This suggests it is a material factor, not cultural. If they can't attend because you're working shifts and you won't be paid if you take the time off, that is a material factor, not a cultural one. Culture, yep, is the impact. No, it's not. It's labeling. Yes, it is culture because parents can encourage their children to value education, and value is part of culture. But no, you're being very anti-working class culture, and many can't physically attend parents' evening, which suggests that that's a material factor, which ties quite nicely into my material deprivation paragraph. So no, it's not culture is this side. Class inequality is not caused by cultural factors, but material. So class inequality is not caused by cultural factors, but material deprivation. Okay. Smith and Noble. Note, it's the impact of poverty on educational success. You know, the impact of poverty on educational success. Poor housing, with overcrowding and damp. Poor diet leads to lower levels of concentration and higher rates of sickness. Lower levels of consciousness and higher rates of sickness. Forsyth and Furlong found that the most significant factor deterring working class groups from university was the cost. It was £3 grand a year. The most significant factor that deters working class groups from university is the cost. And catchment area, schools in certain catchment areas with more social deprivation may find higher turnovers of teachers due to issues of discipline. You might find a higher turnover of teaching due to issues of discipline. And the Sutton Trust found that the most successful comprehensives, or the highest performing, the highest performing in terms of GCSE results, the highest performing comprehensives had 50% less free school meals pupils and are more socially selective. You can cherry pick. So, Sutton Trust, Forsyth and Furlong, and Smith and Noble. This shows that cultural factors do not affect class inequality, but it is material deprivation that causes a lack of concentration and lower rates of attendance due to sickness. It's not cultural factors that affect class inequality. It is material deprivation that causes a lack of concentration and lower rates of attendance due to sickness. However, for Poltron, there is a natural pull. It means that working class families will self-regulate. There's a natural pull of your social class. Working class families will self-regulate so that their children attend working class schools. And this is culturally more comfortable. They will attend working class schools, because this is culturally much more comfortable, as it's similar to cultural comfort zones. Remember I said to you, it's like I walk into like a, I don't know, really bougie bar, or I walk into a designer shop, I swear they can smell the working class on me. It's culturally uncomfortable. And that suggests they're attending the worst performing schools because it's culturally better for them, which suggests it's cultural, not material. Lastly, it's language. Now, what I'd like you to do, I've done these 4 paragraphs and planned them. I would like you to please plan the language one, where I would like you to discuss Bernstein. Include his this shows, try and do your own this shows. This shows why is it cultural that's causing the gap for class inequality, or the gap in achievement. And then again, the however. Try and make the however tie in to Bernstein or turn into culture, like tie in, sorry, to culture. So I'd like you to do the last paragraph. And then in a conclusion, what you should try and do is reach a judgment, is pick a side. Is it culture or not? Which one is it? You may find that you might want to suggest, look, potentially it's cultural, is if culture's devalued or there's a language barrier that will cause significant disadvantage. However, I don't know, it's government responsibility to ensure that children don't go to school hungry and lacking concentration, or that they pass legislation that enables young people and children to live in poor housing that's not, you know, that's not hospitable for people. So you may find that you want to gravitate much more to one than the others, but I would always try and conclude in a way that would suggest that actually, you know, material deprivation does have a really good argument. So do the last paragraph, but also reach a conclusion. Try and pick a side for me, a judgment. Is it cultural or not? Any questions, do let me know. Thank you.